Okay, welcome everybody. We're just going to wait 30 seconds to a minute or something to let people join. We're happy to have you today, so hang on tight. We're going to start very soon. Okay, maybe we kick this off gently and introduce ourselves.
Okay, well, I would also want to welcome everybody for joining the session, and really great to be part of another Causal Inference live with Justin, and big thanks to everyone who contributed with their suggestions and discussions, and looking forward to helping everyone with any questions if they have during the session. We will have a Q&A after. I will tell a bit about myself as a very short introduction. So my name is Darko Medin. I'm someone who is a biostatistician, but I'm also someone who works in the development of AI products, AI models, and digital products. So most of my research and my experience is based in life science, but not limited to. So today I will be discussing some interesting perspectives related to causal inference, and that's it for my short introduction. Justin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. First of all, thanks, Darko, for joining me on this. It's always a pleasure to work on this with you. So I'm Justin. I'm a stats consultant. I have my business that I've been running for close to 5 years now. I'm working on a lot of projects in life sciences, biology, also some social sciences on the academic side, and also working with industry, biotech companies, and non-clinical research and things like that. And I'm also passionate about causal inference because I think it's like kind of a new way to approach statistics, which was kind of my original passion. And so I'm working a lot on consulting in that area, but also creating content. So you may know I'm writing a book on causal inference. That's pretty hefty. So I'm have about 250 pages written, and it's available for pre-order. So I'll share a link if you're interested. The first chapter is available free. I'm also running a causal inference group with Alex Molek that probably many of you know on LinkedIn. Again, I'll share a link. There's about almost 2,000 people in it. So the discussions are really engaging. People share papers, they share conferences. So it's a really good resource, and I'm very proud of it. And I also have biostatistics.ca website where we're going to launch a causal inference space to share a lot of resources, career paths, educational guides, things like that, because we really want to make causal inference accessible because we know it's a topic that can be difficult, and there's a need for some information on that. And I have a newsletter, but if ever you need something, you have questions, just reach out on my website, send me a DM. So I get a lot of questions. I try to answer them as best as I can. And it's always a pleasure to help. So, all right. Before I begin, I just want to let everybody know that, as usual with these kind of events, my favorite part is answering your questions. So this can be career questions, education questions, technical questions. Just write a comment, and we're going to keep 20 minutes at the end. We go over every question. Sometimes we don't have time to do them live, but we will definitely take time after, maybe tomorrow or in the next few days, to answer them on LinkedIn, right? So we're going to answer to your comments. So no questions unanswered. It's a really great way to exchange and learn. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions you may have, and we will be very pleased to help you and answer them. Okay, so let's start. So the first topic I wanted to present was the kind of like a kind of roadmap to learning causal inference. Like, how would I go about this? So let's do it from beginner to advanced. I'm going to share a few books and a few resources that I think are useful. Obviously, I just want to maybe give you a way to kind of get acquainted with the field. So we just published on my website, actually, a guide that we worked really hard on. And I'll share like the link. So you can go check that out. It's very thorough and we're very proud of it. I think we can help. So you can check that out. And yeah, so a few books. So I kind of chose mostly books that I've read and that I have because I can vouch for them. So I'm going to start with two books that are kind of general public. I mean, if you have no experience in any technical field, they might be a bit difficult, but they're not super mathematical. They don't use a lot of symbols. They're very based on narratives and storytelling. So I think they're a good, if you know little to nothing about causal inference, these are great books to kind of make you curious and want to learn more. So there's one very famous, obviously, the Book of Why by Judea Pearl. So this book kind of explains Pearl's point of view on causality. He goes into history. He kind of does a lot of storytelling about his career and how these breakthroughs were achieved. Very, very compelling. It's a great book. It's been, it's sold a lot of copies. It's very popular. And there's another one that's a bit less known that came out in 2023, I believe. It's just called Causal Inference by Rosenbaum. So this one is about a different approach than Pearl. It doesn't use graphical models, which you might be familiar with. It's all about potential outcomes, and it's kind of rooted in the more traditional statistics point of view. So Rosenbaum was a student of Rubin, that you might know, that kind of invented or at least reinvented the potential outcomes model. So these two books are general public books. If you don't know nothing, really, really great. And if you just want to start approaching it, there's a few people on LinkedIn I can recommend that you follow. Well, obviously, myself and Darko, we post content. We think that's valuable. At least we try our best. There's also Alexander Molak, who kind of is closer to the machine learning area of causal inference. He does a podcast. He does interviews with great researchers. He presents at conferences. So I would suggest you follow him. He does a lot of causal inference content. He has a newsletter. There's a lot more. There's Scott Cunningham, who's a economist book also that I'll share soon, that posts a lot about it. He comes more from the economics tradition of causal inference. So it's like different points of views on causal inference. And I think they complement each other very well. And obviously there's a lot more, but these are kind of the ones that I've been following for a long time, and I can kind of vouch that their content is great. So if you're more intermediate, like you kind of know statistics, you know what causal inference is about, I can probably suggest a few books. So this one, the Scott Cunningham, who I just mentioned, the mixtape, again, very focused on more the econometrics point of view, but it's great. It's kind of accessible, but it's a bit more technical. You need to be able to understand some technical stuff. Then there's Alex Molak's book, Causal Inference and Discovery in Python. So this one is unique because it's one of the few books that uses Python and that covers causal discovery, which we will discuss later. What's the difference between causal inference and causal discovery? And then I like this one. It's also by Pearl, but with a few collaborators, Causal Inference and Statistics, a primer. So this, again, it assumes a bit of statistical knowledge, but not that much. It kind of goes over what you need, probability, regression models, before jumping into the causality and the graphical models. So that I would suggest is kind of the intermediate level. Also, the book that I'm writing, I would say, is from intermediate to advanced. There's a lot. I'm going to cover the prerequisites in the book, but it might be a bit hard if you never did statistics to jump into books like these and my book. And once you kind of understand how to speak about statistics on a more formal level, you have kind of the mathematical and statistical skills. Maybe you have a little bit of experience with coding and data analysis and things like that. You can jump into more complex books. So there's a lot of books that I kind of won't name, but any book on experimental design. So randomized experiments are one side of causal inference, and you can kind of be very creative in how you do these experiments. And there's a lot of books about how to design these, how to analyze these. So I would suggest learning that. Sometimes we kind of forget that this is causal inference and it's been around for a long time. So don't neglect the experimental design part, especially today in industry. A/B testing and online experiments are really big. So these principles are very, very useful. And then to me, these are like the two kind of foundational books. So there's like Rubin and Imbins. So Rubin, a statistician, Imbins, an economist. This is all about potential outcomes framework. There's no graphical models, but it's very formal. It's very thorough. It talks about propensity scores, instrumental variables, randomization inference, a whole bunch of topics. And then there's Pearl's causality. I don't have the dust jacket, but you see Pearl causality. This is all about Pearl's approach. It goes into depth. There's a lot of content. It's very mathematical. But once you kind of understand what it's about, these books are really, really great. And then there's a few other ones that are more specialized, like Vanderweel's book that I like, also very advanced, but explanation about mediation analysis, interaction analysis, and how to kind of do these from a causal inference point of view. Yeah, and there's a few other books. There's Vanderland's book about targeted learning, which is also very mathematical, but very, very interesting. And obviously, once you're at an advanced stage, you can start reading the new literature, which is very expansive. There's a lot of papers coming out every day. So I would not suggest necessarily to jump on the hottest paper right now if you're just beginning, because you might get lost. So start with these easier resources and then go to the more advanced stuff. So that's kind of my path with books, and I would pass it over to Darko.
Thank you so much, Justin. That was really, I think, a very comprehensive set of resources for everyone interested in causal inference and potentially even causal discovery. So a lot of these resources, as Justin was mentioning, a lot of them are open source. So a lot of the packages that we will be also discussing in this live event, a lot of them are open source. Most of them that we will be discussing, and most of them in general, most of the software used, most of the packages used are really open source, which is great for multiple reasons. First, they're accessible to practically everyone who can who learns how to use them. So there are a lot of advantages using open source packages, but there are also prerequisites that need to be there for those open source packages to be used as a very good resource. And one of those prerequisites is that the package is, it has enough quality checks that it passed, and that these quality checks ensure that the resources packages we use are going to be as accurate as possible and as reliable as possible. So there is the theoretical angle that also needs to be related to whatever package we use. And two fantastic programming languages for causal inference are R and Python. So these are the most popular causal inference programming languages today, and some of them are even the most popular in general as programming languages used. And another great thing, and it's also related to what Justin was mentioning, is that we have communities which are there to help everyone find a solution to a specific issue, a problem. And there are so many communities out there. One of the communities that I would also suggest is Justin's Causal Inference group, where there are a lot of quality discussions about specific topics. So that's one of the, I think, advantages of having live events like this, is that we have a chance to discuss a very specific, concrete topic, and instead of being very general about specific topic or item, we have a chance to discuss specifically ways to reason, ways to resolve a specific problem. And as I said, we welcome all the questions. So if you want to ask a question, you can ask anytime in the chat, but we will be having a dedicated Q&A as the last 20 minutes of this live. So anyone can post any question related to causal inference. So to summarize this story about open source and programming languages for causal inference, I think that R and Python are so powerful, not just for causal inference, for many other fields, but they're very powerful for causal inference, because causal inference is about resolving many, well, I would call them the special issues in data science and statistics that we really needed dedicated packages to resolve those problems. And that's where a lot of open source programmers, contributors, developers, even companies, some of the largest companies in the world also develop R and Python packages for causal inference, which we also will be mentioning later. So that's a very brief summary and introduction to what we will be discussing next. So Justin is writing a book about causal inference, and I really can't wait to read that book. And I think Justin has a lot of experience with R packages specifically, for causal inference. So I would really love to hear more from Justin about R packages which are dedicated for causal inference.
Yes, thanks, Darko. So I spoke about this before, but I'll share it again. I'll send you guys the link in comments again. CRAN, which is the repository for R packages, has what they call a task view on causal inference, which is basically just a web page with hundreds of causal inference packages and how they fit, which ones are maintained, what topics they cover, and things like that. So I would suggest you kind of note that resource, and when you're looking for a package, you can go check. But I'll share a few of them just quickly. So obviously, like, if you're familiar with causal inference, you know that one way of doing causal inference is kind of to use the identifiability assumptions, and when the assumptions are verified, you can kind of interpret a regression model parameter as a causal effect estimate. So in that sense, if you do the proper design or the proper work before, you can just use the basic stats LM function or GLM function, and you can interpret the parameters as causal effect estimates. But again, this is in very specific cases. Usually, we can't just do that. We need to use more advanced methods. So let's go over a few. So if you have a randomized experiment, and I talk about this in my book, and Imbins and Rubin, they go into this in detail too. You can perform what is called randomization inference. So this is not something new. It's a technique that Fisher invented back in the 20s. But there's a package that's called RI2 that allows to implement this randomization inference approach. Again, this is when you have randomized experiments, and it's testing what we call sharp null hypotheses. So it's a specific kind of approach. Then we have methods that are called G-computation methods that use conditional outcome regression models. So a bit of a mouthful, but basically it's again based on regression, but it's not just a simple regression. There's some weighting and some other tricks that they use to kind of estimate the causal effect. So there's a very popular package called G-formula, which implements these methods. Next, inverse probability weighting methods. Again, this is also very common a method to kind of balance treatment and control groups on the confounding factors. So the package to do this is called Weightit. So this implements weighted methods. And again, I'll share it. I'll post a comment with all of them because sometimes they're written in particular ways. Then there's matching methods. So this is kind of, it can be done in different ways, but the basic idea is to find two people that have similar characteristics and kind of compare them directly. And there's a package to do this to kind of help find matches, and you kind of need special estimators of variance and things like that when you use these techniques. So the package is called Matchit. So this package kind of handles this for you. Instrumental variable methods. So this is a technique that's used a lot in econometrics, but not only in econometrics. There's a package called IVReg. So this is kind of to help implement these methods. And then I won't go over every package, but just a few other topics of methods that are covered in the books I talk about, that I will cover in my book. There's doubly robust methods and targeted machine learning methods. So these are kind of more newer methods, if we can say it like that. Then there's also differences in differences, which is popular in econometrics. You can also use specialized packages to do mediation analysis, right? So when the effect does not impact the outcome directly, or not only directly, but through a third variable that's called a mediator. So there's dedicated packages to do that. And the final package, which I use a lot in my book, and that will kind of segue into the next topic, is the ggdag package. So it's kind of an extension of ggplot, the popular plotting package in R, that allows to draw computerized DAGs. So DAGs, directed acyclic graphs, that kind of are a very useful tool for causal inference. So I was thinking, let me explain quickly what are DAGs. I will show a few, and then we can kind of go from there. So yeah, so let me just present just a quick DAG. So this is from chapter 1 of my book. Can you confirm, Darko, that it's... Oh, I see it. Okay.
Yes, I can see the visual.
Okay, so a directed acyclic graph is very useful. It's kind of, you use dots or nodes to illustrate variables, and you draw arrows that have a direction between them to kind of illustrate this variable. We think it has a causal effect on another variable. One thing that is often, I think, mistaken is that drawing an arrow is kind of like the assumption you're making, but it's actually the other way around. It's when you don't draw an arrow, it's a very strong assumption. You're assuming that there is no effect at all, that the effect is zero. So when you're drawing DAGs, in doubt, draw an arrow. Okay, so for example, this is a famous example that I talk about in my book, right? So smoking has a causal effect on lung cancer. There was a huge debate in the 50s and 60s around this. And very famously, I posted about this a lot, but Fisher argued, well, we know that genetic factors influence the development of cancer. And he argued, why wouldn't genetics also influence the propensity for people to smoke? And this third hidden genetic factor could be the one responsible for the correlation we observe between smoking and lung cancer. And it's not because smoking has a direct effect on lung cancer. So with DAGs, we kind of make all of this very visual, very intuitive. Other strengths of DAGs, they don't assume any form for the link between two variables. So for example, smoking and lung cancer, on this DAG, we just say there is a causal effect by putting an arrow, but we don't assume that it's linear or quadratic or any form. So in this sense, we say that it is fully non-parametric. Another strength of DAGs is that we can use a lot of the mathematical tools to do causal inference with a given DAG are fully automated. They can be implemented by algorithms. So for example, with the ggdag package I was talking about earlier, you can draw a DAG and use R to ask it questions like, oh, what are the confounders? What confounder should I control for? Is the causal effect identifiable from my data? Right? Which means, can I estimate it consistently from the data I have? And consistently is a technical term. I won't get into that, but all of this is to say that it kind of automates away a lot of the work when you have a DAG that you're confident with. So this is powerful, but it's also a double-edged sword, right? Anytime we automate a lot of the work of inference and the work of conducting scientific inquiry, we're a bit susceptible to not thinking deeply enough. So my advice is that drawing the DAG is shouldn't not be taken lightly, especially when you have a lot of variables in a complex case. It's extremely important that you are confident that the DAG is accurate as best as you can. So that might involve speaking with experts, right? So as a statistician, I don't always know everything about the field. I need to speak with experts to kind of draw a cool DAG before jumping to, oh, let's ask the computer to solve this problem for me, right? So it's important to have a DAG that's based on expert knowledge rather than data-driven, except when you're doing causal discovery, which we will explain a bit later. So this is kind of a short introduction to DAGs, and I just wanted to show maybe another one, just because, yeah, I think it's interesting. So this is another example. So this one is not any specific case, but here the W is like our treatment variable, the Y is the outcome, and then we have three variables that are related like this. And this DAG is a very famous one because it's called M-bias, and there was a huge debate in the literature between Rubin, Pearl, and others about what does this DAG mean for causal inference. So I won't go into the details, but I will cover this in the book. If you have questions, you don't need to wait for the book. Just ask me. But it just shows that we can kind of make them complicated. Someone could argue, well, why is there no arrow from Z1 to Y? And then you kind of have to justify that based on domain knowledge, because the absence of arrow is a very strong assumption. So just to show you, you can add variables, you can have very complex DAGs, and these are very useful for causal inference. So I will pass it to Darko, who wants to, I think, continue speaking about DAGs, but from another point of view.
Yes, this was such a great example, Justin, of how directed cyclic graphs can be. They can be very simple, they can be very complex, and in both cases, it's important to understand the domain knowledge, as you said, because that domain knowledge may help clarify a lot of things, and not just clarify, also evaluate which of those connections are possible. So some connections are identified as potential connections using domain knowledge, and then we often want to try to validate or somehow make inference about that using the data to see if the data fits into the model that we defined. So one interesting aspect is that one could argue and ask a question, why do we, most of the time in causal inference, why do we define DAGs? Why don't we define something which is not a DAG, which is not a directed acyclic graph? And there are a lot of details related to that. Details such as mathematical assumptions that exist. So a lot of causal inference models rely on specific assumptions. So we have to assume something to be able to make inference about a specific causal association. So it's very important to check those assumptions. And again, an example how domain knowledge is important, because we may use domain knowledge to help us check some of the assumptions. Another example of why we would use a DAG is because it's so explainable. It's simplifying most of the time. It's simplifying very complex phenomena that we have in the world. Some examples could be very complex biological systems or very complex economical systems where we have thousands of variables. And a lot of those variables are not causal associations. Just a portion of them is, and we need some system that would simplify how do we visualize this simpler model that can be identified using causal inference. So directed cyclic graphs are a lot about explainability, because as Justin was showing, it's actually a very simple principle where we have nodes and edges, and in directed cyclic graphs, those edges have a specific, they have a direction from one node to another. That's why we call them directed. And this is very important, because one of the main premises that almost everyone who was theorizing about causality in general, not just the causal inference, is that there is a cause and effect, right? So we have a cause and effect, and we practically, when we say that, we define this direction. We say, okay, there's a cause, and then we have a direction towards an effect. But in reality, things can get more complicated. Things can get very, very, they can change. Something that was cause in one moment may suddenly become the effect, and vice versa. Something which was the effect may become the cause. And this increases a lot of complexity, and it's very difficult to interpret this situation. You know, when we have something that's causing another thing, let's say it's one variable, one phenomena that's causing another phenomena, but then this phenomena that was caused, that's actually the effect, in another moment in time may change, and it actually may become the cause, reversing the direction towards the first variable. So that's one situation that's very complicated to understand. How can something, be? It would practically be bidirectional. Then, the direction would lose a sense, and when we lose direction of those arrows, of those edges, it becomes very difficult to interpret any causal model. So one of the reasons why we use directed cyclic graphs is that, because they're very clear, and we have very specific situations. We know exactly how a confounder looks. It has two directional edges flowing from that confounder towards two other variables or more, and then we know exactly how a specific causal graph for colliders looks. We know exactly how a directed chain looks. It's very easy to define specific situations, but in reality, things may not always, it's very important to use DAGs, because they help in this explainability and inference part. However, very often in reality, we may have a different situation. So we may have a situation where it's actually cyclic. So I will explain some more on this topic in a few minutes, and now I will pass to Justin to continue with another topic.
Yes. So I think our last topic, causal inference versus causal discovery. Is that what you had in mind, Darko?
Yes, I think that's actually a great continuation of the previous one.
Okay. So right, we call the field causal inference. So what does this mean? We kind of so inference, right, is kind of the basic task of statistics, right? So inference is kind of using data to understand something that we can't be 100% certain of, right? So causal inference is kind of using data to infer causality and estimate not only is there a causal effect, but how big is the causal effect? How does one variable impact the other? If I manipulate the cause, how will the effect behave? So this is very close to traditional statistics. causal inference just comes and says, well, when we have a certain set of assumptions, the thing you were doing with statistics for the past 100 years, well, it can be interpreted as causality in specific cases. So that's like the basic. And then causal discovery, it kind of takes the other approach. Causal discovery is about, okay, look, I have this huge amount of data that is maybe from a complex system. Like, I don't know, we have this huge hospital database with thousands of variables and millions or hundreds of thousands of patients. Or we have this complex manufacturer that has a bunch of sensors everywhere that measure in real time thousands of variables. And we kind of want to ask, okay, is there some cause and effect relationships that I can kind of discover in this data? And that is causal discovery. So you start from the data and you try to find a causal model. Whereas in causal inference and in statistical inference in general, you make a statistical model, right? You might make it a causal statistical model. And then you look, does the data fit this model? But causal discovery is you look at the data and you try to find a model that fits. So it's like two different approaches. And causal discovery is kind of a newer field. And in general, it's very difficult because there is a problem. Usually causal discovery is about finding a DAG that could reflect the data. But when you kind of try to do it, you fall into some problems that some DAGs are what they call observation equivalent. And I talk about this in the chapter 3 of my book. But some DAGs, they are different, but they will generate the same patterns of dependence and independence in the data. So you kind of have to do causal discovery, you use algorithms to go through these huge amounts of data, but you also need to have expert knowledge to kind of help the algorithm with what it cannot discover. So there's a lot of methods to do this, and it's kind of a new field. There's a lot of companies that are implementing, like startups that are working on these algorithms and trying to implement them in real life situations. So it's a very exciting field. It promises a lot, but it's still an area of very, very active research. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Darko, and then we will jump to the questions.
Yeah, I would add one very interesting topic, which is related to causal discovery. As you said, a lot of companies and a lot of platforms are developing such solutions, and one very interesting use case is using artificial intelligence for causal discovery. And it's a very interesting use case where, for everyone who's familiar with artificial intelligence and, for example, how neural networks work. So in general, predictive use case, these neural networks can be used to, they can be trained to make predictions as accurate as possible. And most AI models today are in some form predictive AI models. However, this is one very interesting use case where we can use, for example, a neural network and train it to find the best possible causal structure from the data we provide for training of that model. And one example is related to what we were discussing previously, which is the directed cyclic models. So one very concrete specific use case would be that we can train a neural network to find the best or the optimal directed acyclic graph in the data. And that could be criteria for training an AI model. Most AI models have specific criteria that we want to use to train them, and we define this in the loss function. So as Justin was saying, one very interesting topic, and just wanted to complement the story about causal discovery, which is a very, very interesting topic today. And I think that a lot of developments will be happening in this field in the near future. They already are. And causal discovery using AI and machine learning is a set of very interesting research fields. To mention another detail, Justin was mentioning a lot of packages from R, which is a very comprehensive, I would say, a list of packages. If I may mention one package, for example, which is very interesting for causal discovery, it's the GCastle in Python. So it's actually a collection of many implementations, starting from basic causal discovery, statistics-based causal discovery approaches, to using graph neural networks to perform causal discovery using AI. So that's it from me in this complement of Justin's story. And as we said at the beginning, we will have a Q&A session at the end where everyone can post a question either in chat or we also have a LinkedIn Live, so you can post a question, anything that's interesting to you, anything that you would like to know more about related to causal inference. We will try to answer all questions live, but if we cannot answer all of them during the duration of the event, we will try to answer all of them on LinkedIn chat. So, Justin, if there are any questions that you already think we could answer?
Yeah, so I'll just add one comment and then I jump to the first question. So for causal discovery, I shared it earlier, but maybe it's a good time to just mention again. For if you're very new, Causal Inference and Discovery in Python by Alex Molak. The third part is all about causal discovery. He uses GCastle that Darko mentioned to kind of explain like the basic tools and the limitations and what they do. And it's a good introduction if you're completely new. I would highly suggest it. Okay, so we have a lot of great questions. So I'll start. There's one that is directed to me, so I think I'll start with that one. So hi, Justin. Thanks for the brief review of books. I'm doing research at the intersection of causal AI and financial domain. Are there any books or papers you would recommend in this area? Okay. So to be honest about finance, I'm not very knowledgeable. I mean, I studied finance 10 years ago, but now I don't work at all in that field. But for causal AI in general, yeah, so again, very, if you know a little bit about AI, this book for an introduction of causal AI is very good. And also a machine learning AI heavy book is the book, I forget the name, but it's by Bernard Schulkopf. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but I can share it in the comments if you want. That's a book that goes a lot into machine learning techniques for causal AI. And there's also the book by Causal Inference for the Brave and True, which also goes a lot into these machine learning techniques. So for overview of general machine learning, I would suggest that. And for specific applications in finance, I'm sorry, I don't really know if there's any books or relevant papers because it's not my field of expertise. But I am certain that there is, because I saw a lot of people talking about it, like on LinkedIn and things like that. So probably if you do a quick research, you can probably find the important authors in finance, causal AI, and go from there. Great question. Thanks. I'll pass it over to Darko. You're on mute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Justin. So there are so many interesting questions. And as I said, if we don't answer any of them, we will answer them. We'll try to answer them later. I have a question here from, I think it's a very interesting question, from Joao Diaz. So how to deal with variables that have causality. So I assume that are causally associated, but they don't appear to have a correlation at first sight. This situation is possible. So it is a rare situation, but a possible situation that may appear, especially in high complexity data sets. And causal discovery, actually, using AI that I was mentioning before, is one of the approaches that can be used in such situation, because we can use high complexity AI models, which can leverage information in a way that simple statistical model or simple correlation analysis would not be able to do, and try to identify these hidden patterns in the data. So there are AI models that can be designed to identify hidden patterns in the data. One such example would be trying to identify hidden causal pattern in the data. And another approach, which we repeat, and we repeat it for a reason, which is the domain knowledge. So if we know from the domain, that's why it's important, not just for many other fields that we often talk about, but also for causal inference and causal discovery as branches of causal science. It's very important to know what we are studying. If we analyze something, it's very important to know what's behind that analysis, what is producing that data. So if we are performing causal analysis in molecular biology field, we need to understand the molecular biology. We need to understand what's happening with those molecules. One example would be what's happening with the DNA, RNA, proteins. How are they related to each other, and so on. In other fields as well, if we are performing a marketing strategy causal inference, we just need to know a lot about marketing. We need to know how are these variables, how is the data that is produced for those models, how it's produced, what's producing the data, what nuances can we include in terms of including the domain knowledge. So one such example would be, if we know that two variables, or even if we don't know, we rarely know something for sure in this field, but let's say that there is a lot of logic in a specific situation where two variables should be causally associated. We can see that from the logic, but we just don't see that in the data, because data doesn't have to be perfect. Data doesn't have to reflect all the time what's happening in the real world. Ideally, we want the data to be as reflective as possible of reality, but that's why it's important to utilize approaches such as, just including whatever knowledge you have about specific phenomena, and then if it doesn't, if it's not a match with the data we see, then that's definitely something to explore further, to analyze further. Yeah. Justin, are there any questions, or would you like to add anything?
No, that's perfect. Yeah, like Darko said, the data is not always perfect. There can be things we didn't observe that kind of make the correlation close to zero, even if there's a causal effect. But if you think there's a causal effect, you should not change that based on the zero correlation, and you should keep the causal effect in your model in general. Okay, next question. I'll kind of do two at the same time because they're closely related. Would it be possible to consider a Zenodo group for sharing all these great bibliographic references? Yeah, of course. I'm not familiar with Zenodo, but I imagine it's kind of a platform to share resources. Yeah, I mean, just if you're interested in doing that, we can just reach out and we can kind of figure out how to set this up. I'm always super excited by building community and sharing resources. It taps into my passion for teaching and exchanging. So I would love to discuss this if you want. And then I'll take another question that's closely related. Any good books on this topic that is programming language agnostic? Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of, most of the books that I share, so some have code. For example, Alex Molak's books has Python in the title, so you know to expect it to be Python based. But all the theory, all the principles are programming language agnostic. So, for example, the Imbens and Rubens book or the Perl books, they don't have any code. So you can kind of learn the theory. The Cunningham book, for example, has R and Stata. So it really depends. If you want no code, if you want a few languages, there's books out there that cover all the different languages. You can kind of learn with the book and practice with code yourself. My book uses R, but I have plans to also make a Python version, things like that. So yeah, I hope this helps. But most books, I would not be afraid of, oh, maybe this book is not language agnostic. The theory remains the theory, and the examples remain relevant, even if you don't practice the code. So, okay. Thanks for that question. Well, thanks for both of these questions. Great questions. Darko, do you want to take another question?
Yes, I think we have a lot of other topics that we maybe didn't have the chance to discuss. So we will be answering all that are possible. But there is another question here that I can potentially answer, which is from Robrecht van den Rijse. The question is, isn't causal discovery not more of a validity tool rather than a discovery tool, given that it doesn't work well for unobserved confounders? So that's actually a question related to two specific fields that we were talking about today, which is causal inference and causal discovery. So if we're talking about causal inference, a lot in causal inference is about validity, trying to validate a specific model that we maybe formed based on some assumptions, or we just want to test out specific hypotheses. But causal, well, the approaches that we use in causal inference can be adapted slightly to be used in a reversed order. So we want to see in the data if that data can inform us about potential causal associations. Because there is so much data that's created today around the world, it just makes sense to use specific algorithms to try to find out from that data if there are specific causal patterns or causal associations that we haven't considered before, and we just have a lot of data, and we want that data to inform us about potential causality. Of course, later we would need to validate this, again, using either causal inference, domain-specific validation experiments, empirical tests, and so on. But very often, data can inform us about a lot of things that usually we could not see. And one great example was actually one of the previous questions. What about hidden causal patterns, the ones that we just cannot see even in the data itself, unless specific algorithm processes that data to reveal those hidden patterns and potentially inform us what to do next, what analysis to perform next. So, Justin, are there any additional items you would add?
No, that's perfect. So I have 1 minute. I'll do a very quick answer and then we can conclude. Do you believe that once causal inference and causal discovery become mainstream, they will reveal evidence that challenges and disproves some widely held social assumptions and biases? Yes, of course. Like we've seen it in history when science develops new methods. It challenges social beliefs, and there's no reason to believe causal inference will be different. We've seen it. A lot of historical examples, smoking and lung cancer, a lot of things like that, relied on causal inference to change our kind of worldview or assumptions about the world. So great question. Okay, so unfortunately, there's a few questions left. We don't have time. We will end this, but we will answer them in the comments. If you think about questions, post a comment or send us a DM or whatever. Feel free to reach out to me. I imagine, Darko, people can reach out to you too if they have questions. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Feel free to do so.
Okay, so thank you everybody for participating. I hope this was valuable. I shared a lot of links in the event on LinkedIn. Feel free to visit those links. Feel free to reach out. And again, thank you so much for asking questions. It was very interesting. It makes me think a lot, and I love it. So thanks for participating, and I hope we can do something again soon.
Thank you so much, Justin. I also want to thank everyone for participating, for being active, asking questions, and making suggestions also. So hope that this live event was useful. And thank you again, Justin, for teaming up for Causal Inference too, and looking forward to next editions in the future.
Thanks, Darko. Thanks, everybody. Have a good
everybody.
rest of your day, no matter where you are, and let's connect soon. Bye.